Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today's session. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com, and I'm pleased to welcome Rob Curls from Concerto Cloud Services for today's event, all about Dynamics ERP in the cloud options other than Dynamics 365. A very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to it. As we get started here today, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, I want to open up a brief poll that we thought would start things off, just to give Rob a little better idea of where you in the audience are in terms of your views about on-prem versus the cloud. So if you wouldn't mind just filling that out, it'll just help sort of shape today's presentation. We also want to keep things interactive, and you can ask questions at any time. Look for the Q&A block to the right of the main presentation window, and feel free to put in your questions at any point. I know Rob will be saving time at the end for those. So we'll let this poll run for just another minute or so, and I will hand it off to Rob to get us started. Rob, I'm just going to open your line here.
Thanks, Jason. So good afternoon, everybody. Anybody on the West Coast, good morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Dynamics 365, some of the capabilities of it, if it's right for your organization. We'll talk a little bit about the migration process to go from an existing deployment of Dynamics, whether that be GP, SL, NAV, or AX, to D365. And then we're going to talk about options around if we find that D365 isn't right for us or isn't right for us now, how else can we leverage the cloud with our existing investment in Microsoft Dynamics. As Jason mentioned, my name is Rob Curls. I'm a solutions consultant with Concerto Cloud Services, which means that I have the honor and the privilege to work with customers like you to help map out their migration strategy and their cloud strategy for their all-up organization. So is Dynamics 365 the right solution for your organization? Let's start and talk about what is Dynamics 365 first. So it's a suite of services where Microsoft has combined the code base for Dynamics AX along with the code base for Dynamics CRM to provide their enterprise components. So you have D365 that's bundled into different categories. So you have sales and field service and customer service, which really are all wrapped around the CRM, the legacy CRM code base. And then you have D365 for operations, which is in financials, which is what you would traditionally see around an ERP system. There's really two renditions, so to say, or almost thresholds. They offer enterprise, or there's a business edition. The business edition today is based on a scaled-back version of the NAV code base, but it doesn't have all the functions that were in or that are in Dynamics NAV. There's plans that by spring of 2018 that Microsoft is going to be releasing a fully functional business edition of D365. So that's exciting to hear that that's coming down the pipe. One big change from the legacy applications to D365 is the delivery mechanism. So if you've been using GP or SL or NAV for a while, or AX, you know that it's a traditional rich client, and that you would either have an application installed on your workstation, or you would have a terminal server. There would be a remote desktop server that would publish that application out to you from if you're running within the data center or within a cloud environment. With D365 for operations, the client is now a web-based client, so it makes for a better user experience when you have remote users, branch offices, or when deploying in the cloud. So with D365, you might be surprised to hear that you do have more deployment options than just SaaS-based deployment with Microsoft. So that's option A, and that's probably the default option that a lot of organizations will go with, where it's a SaaS-like deployment. It's deployed through LCS, configured through there, and then deployed into Azure, and it's a managed environment. However, along the way, there will be components in which you will have to support, even if it is deployed in Azure. good example are integrations with applications that might not be in AppSource. So if you have a reporting system that you're working with, you have to support the connectivity into that Azure environment and into wherever those applications are installed, whether that's on-prem, in private cloud, or in Azure as well, just under a separate cloud service, so to say. You could do an on-premise deployment with the purchase or the subscription to D365. You do get on-premise use rights for both financials and for sales and field service. We've seen a lot of organizations leverage that recently because of some challenges maybe that they have due to compliance reasons. So, for example, to date, D365 hasn't achieved their SOC 2 compliance, and so we've worked with publicly traded organizations who have to have that compliance to deploy it in the private cloud. Or if there's additional concerns wrapped around wanting to have more control over the deployment, ITAR compliance, things like that, for a private cloud or an on-premise deployment is a good deployment option. And then hybrid. And so we have some customers that they are comfortable with having D365 for sales deployed through the online component, and they might not be as comfortable with with D365 for financials deployed in that model, and they're able to still integrate between the online component and the private cloud install. I touched a little bit there that when you're deploying in that SaaS model, there still are some responsibilities that will fall on your organization. We've highlighted a couple of them here, and these are areas where a CSP or a cloud services provider can help you. If you're acquiring your licenses via a CSP, it's a requirement that they provide these functions for you. So leads me into another topic of how can I obtain the software itself. And you have a few different options. If you're a large enterprise, which Microsoft has actually raised the bar for enterprises from 250 seats, I think it's to over 500 seats these days, you can acquire it on your EA. You can obtain the licenses. If you are a smaller business, you can obtain the licenses if you're on Office 365 today. It's actually, you can purchase licenses through the Office 365 portal to have a bundled license. So rather than just having an Office 365 E3 license, you can add on D365 components within there. Or the third option is you can obtain those licenses via a cloud solutions provider, cloud service provider like Concerto, who can help you and walk you through the components of the ordering, the procurement, the provisioning, and then the support of that environment long term. So I know many people have made the investment, and probably all the people on this call have made the investment in a version of Microsoft Dynamics in the past, and probably been operating on it for a number of years. We talked to a lot of customers that, you know, they'll say that they're lifers, they love GP, or they love NAV, and they don't want to move. Or they're entertaining the idea. They've been using it for a long period of time. They're on an older version, and they're going to have to go through an upgrade process regardless. So they're looking at, should we be moving to D365 at this time, or how do we move to D365 at this time? To date, Microsoft has not released a straightforward migration path, so it's not like an upgrade that you're used to with GP, where you have just a weekend where you're going to be going through the upgrade process, you convert your data, and boom, you're ready to go. It's more of a re-implementation because it is a new product. I know there are a lot of resellers that are out there and organizations that are out there that have, because we're maturing in the process, have developed IP around a consistent migration process, and so partners are out there that are offering that migration process that makes it a little bit easier, and it isn't as burdensome as it was about 6 to 8 months ago. So we're getting more and more knowledge in that path and in the requirements to do so. But it is not an easy upgrade, so to say. Just for example, I had a customer that we were working with the other day. They were looking at they'd just done an upgrade of CRM on-premise to 2016, and then they wanted to entertain the idea to move to D365. That particular project, smaller organization, fairly straightforward, deployment was approximately 200 hours to do that upgrade or that migration to D365. So there is a component of an investment that's going to be required. So say you go through your due diligence and you don't want to go through a re-implementation, and you want to continue to operate on your existing dynamic solution. You like GP, it meets all of your needs, or you like NAV. What are your options? How long do you have? And what can you do for cloud? And there's lots of options that we'll go through where you can leverage infrastructure as a service deployment models, and you can move your existing application as is into the cloud. Or if you're looking at an upgrade and you want to, or you have a compelling event, maybe you have some aging hardware that you want to go ahead and maintain that same version of Dynamics but move it into the cloud, we can help you with that. On any of those projects, you want to first define what your goals are. So why are you looking to move to the cloud? As I mentioned before, there's almost always a compelling event. There's almost always an inflection point where I'm going through an upgrade. I'm moving from an older version of GP to the latest and greatest version of GP. Or I had an experience where I had pain. I happen to live in beautiful Tampa, Florida, and about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, we had a very troubling experience with a hurricane. And a lot of organizations around the area realized that, hey, my business continuity plans are not as buttoned up as I'd like. So that's their compelling reason for wanting to go to the cloud. Other companies might be going through a situation where they're maturing their business and maybe they're going public, and they need to tighten up some security and controls in order to satisfy auditors. So understand what your reasons are, and then that will help you to map a solution as to what is best for your organization. Additional areas to consider when you are looking to move to the cloud. There's a lot of conversation. I hear a lot of questions from people about, will my integrations work, or will my customizations work? And so you can absolutely support the integrations you have today or customizations you may have in your deployment through an IaaS model or infrastructure as a service model. Just make sure that you have connectivity into wherever those integrations are. So you may be pulling data in from another system. Typically, a VPN connectivity between the network where that other system is and where your dynamic system will exist is all you'll need to make that happen. There's a lot of cloud-based ISVs that are out there today that support integration components over web calls. It's not a scary place to be. Make sure when you're looking at cloud solutions that you bring up early and often any compliance drivers that you may have, because oftentimes what you see is not necessarily what you get, and that you may be expecting it to be fully taken care of, that you have disaster recovery taken care of and backups taken care of, but the cloud environment that you're going to might not have that as a component built in. Those might be different options. And so, for example, PCI compliance, if you're processing credit cards, might not be included in that cloud offering that you're looking at today. So in terms of infrastructure as a service providers, where can you move your solution to? Two big names in the cloud space, obviously, Amazon Web Services and Microsoft's Azure. So both, leading public cloud solutions where they provide you building blocks to take care of and build out whatever solution you want to do. The problem is you typically have to do that build out of it. It's not an automated click once type deployment of it. You have to build out the infrastructure. You have to create the network. You have to ensure that the backup jobs are configured, that the updates are happening. Another option is you can move to a private cloud solution. Concerto is a cloud services provider, and one of our options is private cloud, where everything is handled for you. We also offer managed public cloud options too that fall in line with that the thought has been put into the workload itself, and we understand the components that are required to operate mission-critical applications like Dynamics ERP, and so the backups are taken care of, patching is taken care of, support is taken care of. So you can look at one or all three of those options. And there are other providers that are out there too. You have the Alibaba Cloud and you have the Google Cloud platform. Probably both are less applicable for most organizations that are going to be running Dynamics. But again, solutions that are out there for your organizations. So again, D365 is out and released into the wild. We have these other versions that we've been operating on for a long time that we like using, that work for our business. But how long will they be available? How long can you run on it? Most organizations don't want to run on an unsupported application, especially when it's supporting the majority of their business. Microsoft has published and has had published for a long time their support lifecycle policies. And really, there's three phases of support and deployment of an application. When the app is first released to the public, you enter into mainstream support. Mainstream support, you're going to get some feature release updates to the application, you're going to get security updates to the application, and you're going to get reasonable commercial support from Microsoft on that particular app. Typically, mainstream support lasts for 5 years. Once you hit that 5-year cycle, you move on to what they term extended support. Under the extended support time period, you're going to continue to receive security updates, but there will be no feature fixes or feature updates to the application. You'll still get reasonable commercial effort support from Microsoft, as they like to say, and that period tends to last approximately 5 years also, and then you'll hit end of life. Once you hit end of life, there will be no more updates, there will be no more patches, and there is no more support. Your application will continue to run for eternity. However, if there's ever an issue with it, you will not get support from Microsoft. You'll be forced to upgrade to the latest and greatest version, or a supported version, I should say, of the particular application. I'll tell you that, again, this life cycle tends to be about 10 years long, or they'll support it for about 2 releases of the software, meaning that if you're on, I'll use Office as an example because I remember the years of it better than other apps. If you're running on Office 2010, Office 22, between there's Office 2013 and Office 2016. Office 2010, the latest service packs, is still supported in some deployments. However, but it's not supported on, say, Office 365. So right now you could run Office 2013 or Office 2016, be fully supported. Microsoft's going to release a new version of Office probably next year. It will be Office 2018, and then you'll have to roll Office 13 onto the others. And it's a very similar model for all of Microsoft's applications. I'll mention, too, just as I was doing some research to prepare this, in terms of Dynamics applications that are going off of extended support and will no longer be supported, SL7 went off of extended support on October 10th of this year. CRM version 4.0 is going off of support, is going end of life next year. Other systems, again, just to give you an idea of the age of some of these systems that are going end of life next year, are systems that were released in 2007, like the System Center Suite or anything else that was released in that time period, 2007, 2008 time frame. If you happen to still be running Office Communicator or Office Communication Server instead of Skype for Business, that'll no longer be supported also. So where do you stand? I created this chart that kind of gives you an idea based on the ERP dynamic solutions as to how long you have on the various versions that you may be running on. So you can see if you're running on GP 2016 R2, you're looking at 2021 before mainstream support ends. So you're looking 5 more years out from there. It puts you at 2026 before that product is end of life. So there's a long life left in a lot of these products. And there's additional versions that are going to be released in 2018 and into the future for GP, for NAV. I'm not as positive on SL. I don't believe there's additional versions coming out, but don't quote me on that. And clearly AX there's not, because that's moved over to D365, that code base has. However, AX 2012 R3 extended support is good till 2023. So you're looking at 5-6 years down the road. So. I'm happy to share out that chart too, by the way, if anybody is curious as to their date, or I can also share out a link for Microsoft has a great tool where you can just type in your product to understand its life cycle and when its time periods are ending. Happy to share those after the presentation. So the case for cloud. We wanted to talk through a couple customers that have been in your shoes that we've worked with recently. To help them out in this process, and just kind of so that way you can see where they are and size them up to maybe where your business needs are. On this particular organization, they've asked to remain anonymous, so I'll respect that, but they're in a professional services industry where they serve Fortune 100 customers. They're a publicly traded organization, and they were looking to go from Dynamics AX into, or they wanted to upgrade to D365. Again, they needed that environment to be SOC 2 certified, and Microsoft wasn't going to have that certification completed, not to say they're not adhering to the practices, but just hasn't been attested to by a third-party auditor until well into late 2018, and they could not allow them to slow down that project. So they opted for a private cloud deployment. So Concerto was able to obtain the licenses. They were able to leverage the on-premise use rights for D365, and we're deploying, and their partner is developing in the private cloud. So that way they can move forward and they can go live early part of next year on D365. Another medical organization that we supported recently, that again, early adopters of D365, they're going online, and it was able to meet their needs. It had the HIPAA compliance component, but again, they had limited IT staff, and they didn't want to have to worry about managing the SaaS application components, the provisioning of the environment, and then ongoing support from a client support perspective. So we were able to help them in managing that cloud deployment of D365. Bodycoat's a good customer of ours that has been leveraging our cloud environment for quite some time now, where they were consolidating. It's a good example where they were moving to Dynamics AX and wanted AX in the cloud. Azure wasn't ready for them at the time when they were moving. D365 wasn't available yet, and so they were consolidating from 18, I believe, different ERP systems into AX. A lot of them were running their branch offices were running Dynamics NAV. Other ones were running third-party ERP systems. A global organization that needed ITAR compliance, where private cloud was just a great fit for them. We're able to deploy AX in the private cloud, ensure access to their global deployment of workforce 24/7, adhere to the compliance needs that they needed to have, and they were able to take advantage of the benefits of cloud and the infinite scalability and the 24/7 coverage and really the turnkey solution for them. So I hope that this afternoon was informative for you. Hope we kind of gave you some background and settled your nerves on if you were worried that, hey, I'm being forced to move to this solution, and let you know that you do have options in the cloud space with your version of Dynamics that you have today, or that there are other options around deployment of D365 if that's the route your organization chooses to go. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time, and hope you have a great day.
Great, thank you, Rob. And we do have a few questions in. If you have yours, please feel free to enter them now. So what about ISVs that are on-prem? Does that mean I can't move Dynamics to the cloud?
No. So I consulted for a number of years, so I'll give my consultant answer. It depends. It depends on the ISV itself. I would say it's not going to prevent you from moving to the cloud whatsoever. What it may prevent you from doing is moving to D365. So I know a lot of the ISVs that are out there have been going through the rewrite process. There's a ton of applications available through AppSource that meet those needs that are similar to your use case. There's a lot of still ISVs that aren't in AppSource yet that can bolt on to D365. So say you're going D365, there could be a deployment of it in Azure or on private cloud, and then we can stand up an environment that supports that application in Azure or in the private cloud, potentially on-premise, to then integrate into that ERP deployment. Now, say it's that other use case where they're not ready for D365 yet, and the ISV is probably, some of them are more important to an organization than the ERP system on the back end. That's a great scenario for private cloud, in that you can move both the ISV and the existing ERP system into the private cloud environment, and you'll be able to access and operate just as you do today.
All right, the next question is asking, what are some of the things I'm responsible for in a SaaS model from Microsoft?
Great question. And I had a slide that kind of highlighted it earlier in the presentation that I'd be happy to send out. We can make a note of the person, Jason. Big component is going to be any ISV environment, connectivity of the ISVs. If it's not an embedded component into the application itself, so a good example is BI that's going to be sitting alongside. So you're responsible for doing the deployment of that infrastructure into Azure. You're responsible for enabling the connectivity via ExpressRoute or VPN potentially between that network that application is on in Azure and your tenant in Office 365. You're responsible for any customizations that are going to be going on in that environment. End-user support. There's if you've gone down the route of doing an Office 365 migration, it's similar responsibility in that you enter in your billing information, but you have to go from there. Like Microsoft will make sure that it's patched and make sure that it's up, and they'll make sure that again, if it's D365, that it's backed up. But you need to add all the users into the environment. You're going to have to work through support components and system administration, so to say, of the application itself.
All right, well, I want to make a final call for questions here. We have one more lined up before we start wrapping up at this point. So the question is, I'm not sure about the costs for moving Dynamics to the cloud and whether that would be beneficial. How can I compare the costs fairly?
The cost can vary greatly of doing a D365 implementation or migration because, as I mentioned before, it's not an upgrade. It's a new implementation of a new product. You'd have to work with your partner to understand, so that way they can help understand what your requirements are and which components within D365 you'll actually want. So I'll say this. It's going to be less expensive than a traditional AX deployment, more than likely, but it's going to be probably more expensive than a deployment of GP that would be simplified. I know that's really big and vague. But I'll say that one of the big benefits is that because it's compartmentalized or componentized, you can bite off in phases that are appropriate for your organization. So say you just want financials. You can just deploy financials. You don't need to deploy field service yet, or you don't need to deploy some of these other components that are out there with it. So it enables you to easily take one bite of the elephant at a time, so to say. So that way you're not looking at this is a $2 million project to implement this ERP system. It's designed to be purchased and consumed in that phased approach.
All right, the next question is, forgive me while I pull this up here. Any thoughts about Microsoft's announcement to not go forward with the D365 Business Edition financials product?
Yeah, it's funny because I was reading, again, prepping for this, and I was reading the other day a recent blog that they're not going to be doing the business, but they're going to be investing the energy and time into bringing forth a solution that's wrapped around NAV, I believe. And personal thoughts on D365 as a whole, I think that Microsoft is trying to target larger customers with it. And I think that's their target, is they want to go after enterprise customers with it. And I think that along the way, you've had partners that are saying, what about mid-market? What about these loyal mid-market customers that need a solution that they have businesses that are more complicated than QuickBooks can serve, that they're willing to spend the money on it? And I think that's where you'll still see development around the existing applications to be able to fill that void for a period of time. Again, this isn't official. This is a gut check, probably for 6 years, until they can roll out a full-blown cloud-based solution like they're doing with D365. So I would say look towards something with it's based on NAV for it, because if you look at NAV compared to GP, so to say, you have a lot more advancements in user experience, really. And with NAV, you have a very well developed web-based application. You have click once deployment of the rich application. You have a tablet client. So there's different deployment options around there, and for accessibility, you have, again, features and functions that might be a little bit different between the two. But it's also that three-tiered architecture where there's the client component, there's the business logic component that lends itself, that's similar in line with AX, and then there's the database backend as opposed to GP, which is more of a client-server type application where you have the rich client. I know there's the web client. In the last 5 years, I have not seen a tremendous adoption of the web client out in the field. Not to say there aren't people using it, just the customers that I haven't run across haven't been. Hope that helps.
All right. Yeah, thanks for the question. And let me just remind everyone, we do have a quick survey that'll pop up when we close out today. If you could take just 15, 20 seconds to fill that out, we very much appreciate it on our side, and I know our speakers always appreciate that feedback too in planning for future presentations. All right, so we've made a final call for questions here. I don't see any additional at this point, so I think we can begin wrapping up. Well, Rob, thanks again for joining us today and for sharing your insight. Really appreciate it. Always good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
All right, with that, we will conclude today's event. Have a great day, everybody.